Bill Buckley once wrote about you famously in a preface to a book of yours that if you think it's hard to argue with Harry Jaffa, try agreeing with him.
Yeah.
And his point was that you had, even by that point in the 80s, I guess, developed a reputation as a what Marx might call a critical critic of conservatism, the position you had yourself embraced and have many times eloquently defined and defended. And indeed you have, over the course of the years, had launched solid volleys in the direction of, heavy volleys in the direction of some of the most famous conservatives of the day. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of them. In the beginning, you had several exchanges with Mel Bradford, with Wilmore Kendall, and with others whom you sometimes call the neo-Confederate wing of the Republican Party or the conservative movement. What was the issue between you and them?
Well, first I'd like to go back and make a commentary on Bill Buckley saying that it's so difficult to agree with Harry Jaffa. That was the preface to an introduction to my book on American conservatism, the American founding, which had another introduction written by Charles Kesler.
Who? Yes, I remember that, yes.
And as far as I could say, that at that point at least, you and I were not disagreeing about anything. And I was not making it, nothing that I had written made it difficult for you to agree with me.
Yes.
So Bill Buckley was really wrong about that, but except that I must say that the number of people who were willing to agree with me then or now is not very large.
Uh-huh.
But I'd say that the core of my disagreement really is with the modern university, because it is the source really of all authoritative opinions in the media, and you find people from time to time like Glenn Beck or Sean Hannity mouthing things that they've gotten from books that they never understood, and so part of what they say is all right, but mostly it doesn't really doesn't become influential in its own right. But I think the best index of the victory of modernity over both the Bible and Greek philosophy is in the use of the word value, which I spoke of, and the complete unconsciousness that this use of this word undermines everything else that they are saying as conservatives, or simply as representatives of the establishment. I once spoke before a group somewhere in one of the coastal cities. There's an institute called the Institute for the Family and Traditional Values. I forget the name of the guy that had it, but he's a well-known spokesman. And I told them, by calling your values, you're denying the truth of what you're trying to get people to accept. I said, you can't. Can you think of Moses as referring to the 10 Commandments as the 10 values? or Jefferson saying, we hold these values to be self-evident?
Yes.
So,
but in a strange way, you're right. I mean, that word, which in a way used to be a left-wing word, became embraced by the right, I mean, as a term of pride and distinctiveness. These are good examples of what you were referring to as the disintegration of morality or natural law morality. And how did the neo-Confederates in the conservative movement succumb to the same kind of mistake or illusion?
Well, Dick, what's his name?
Richard Brookhiser.
Brookhiser.
Yes, okay.
He's written biographies of
very nice books on the founders and other subjects. Yeah.
In fact, I think I reviewed one of his last books, and what was I going to?
But this and the neocons and the neo-Confederates and
Brookhiser wrote a book on Buckley and the future of conservatism.
his memoir of the Right Time, Right Place. His memoir of his experiences with Bill.
And he had one of these large editorial page essays in the Wall Street Journal, in which he spoke about Bill Buckley. And he said in 1955, which would be the year that
National Review began.
Buckley was a Southerner. He was opposed to any form of civil rights. This was during the period of the White Citizens Council.
Well, he was skeptical of. I wouldn't say he was opposed to any form of civil rights. He was skeptical of desegregation, and at that time, the magazine was sort of under the influence of a neo sort of Calhounite view of the American Constitution.
Yes,
so they thought you had to have a constitutional amendment, for example, to. Of course, I think Goldwater had the same view, didn't he? To pass the Civil Rights Act. He thought it raised constitutional problems. Goldwater did.
Yeah, well, the problem that I saw, and had some influence on me, was the fact that the 65 Act should have come before the voting rights should have preceded, because that was an unquestioned constitutional right. And most of the things that have eventually been accomplished, which were in the 64 Act, came after the Voting Rights Act was implemented, and Southern politicians were pursuing the Negro vote. That was
But it's also the case, which you've also written about, that a lot of the early National Review people were very suspicious of Lincoln, or even antithetical to Lincoln. And you've certainly, I think the piece that you mentioned from Richard Brookhiser was making the point that you, in particular, had persuaded Bill Buckley of Lincoln's goodness and of the goodness of the civil rights cause, you might say, for conservatism.
Well, he didn't speak at any great length on the subject, and he spoke about rather infelicitously, the historiographical writings of Harry V. Jaffa. But at least he gave me credit for making this change in Bill Buckley.
No, which was a very important change for him and for the movement of conservatism.
Well, I'm glad if anybody wants to expand on that, because I'd be glad to take all the credit I could. Because at the time it didn't seem to me that I really persuaded anybody. But
well, wouldn't you say now, though, that the influence of the extreme Southern or neo-Confederate faction within conservatism is much reduced from what it was in 1955 or even 1965?
I would say it has gone underground and now is part of the liberal left.
Yes, on the Black Power, multiculturalism
and attitude towards Israel has been a great transforming influence on the left.
Well, to say nothing more, I mean, to have had that influence on Buckley and on the conservative movement is a very important thing.
Well, get up there and stand on the rooftop and yell. I promise I won't contradict the word you say.
All right. Well, we've come to the end of our discussion, I'm afraid. But thank you very much for appearing on The American Mind, and we look forward to your next appearance.
I shall look forward to it also.
Thank you.